Xi Jinping has created, Mr. Speaker, one of the worst human rights tragedies on the face of the earth. Xi Jinping and his government are directly responsible for these crimes against humanity. Our hope is that a reckoning is coming, but only if the international community stands up to thank Mr. Series for his strong support for this legislation, his leadership on neglected tropical diseases. I want to thank my other colleagues, Mr. McCall, and of course Mrs. Bass, who has also been a great supporter of this legislation. Mr. Speaker, neglected tropical diseases, or NTDs, are a group of parasitic and bacterial diseases, including worms, which blind, disfigure, and sometimes kill victims from among the world's poorest people, trapping the most marginalized communities in cycles of poverty. There are numerous examples of them, including Chagas, dengue, leprosy. Could you believe, Mr. Speaker, there are over 200,000 cases of leprosy in the world today, and there isn't an intervention. There are drugs that can treat, mitigate, and even cure it, but sometimes people do not get access to them, and that causes serious problems. The worms, and I'll get into that in a minute, are absolutely devastating as well, and they need to be addressed very aggressively. Mr. Speaker, approximately 2 billion people, almost one-third of the world's population, are at risk of contracting an NTD, and more than 1.4 billion people are currently afflicted with one or more NTDs. Over the years, Mr. Speaker, I have chaired numerous hearings on this, one in 2013, one in 2016 on the global Zika epidemic, and many others, always focusing on the fact that we need to do more. These are preventable, but they're certainly treatable. But if you don't get the drugs, if you don't get the intervention, that person is made, and those who are like that person, to suffer horrifically. I introduced the End Neglected Tropical Diseases Act in 4 separate Congresses, 2014, 2015, 2017, and again this year. So I deeply appreciate Chairman Engel and Ranking Member McCall's strong support for this legislation and for the leadership for bringing it up today. NTDs have an enormous impact in terms of disease burden and the quality of life. It causes the loss of life to about 534,000 people. The NTDs surpass both malaria and tuberculosis in causing greater loss of life years to disability and to premature death. They cause disfigurement, disability, often leading to stigma, social discrimination, and societal marginalization. NTDs create an economic burden of billions of dollars through the loss of productivity and the high cost of health care required for treatment when it gets especially to a critical stage. People afflicted by NTDs are less productive than their healthy counterparts. They jeopardize the ability of people to attend work and school or to produce at full capacity. The social, economic, and health burdens of NTDs falls primarily on low and middle-income countries where access to safe water, sanitation, and health care is limited. At least 100 countries face 2 endemic NTD burdens, and 30 countries carry 6 or more endemic neglected tropical diseases. As I said, they can be controlled, they can be prevented, and even eliminated using low cost and effective, especially when treated early. Research and development and efforts are immediately needed for all NTDs, especially for those for which no treatment currently exists. Recent data published by the WHO confirmed that in 2018, more than 1 billion people were treated for at least one of the 5 neglected tropical diseases. Not well understood, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that neglected tropical diseases are infecting large numbers of vulnerable people, especially children, in developed countries, including the United States. Of course, these include West Nile virus, dengue fever, and most recently, Zika. An article published in the medical journal The Lancet scrutinized this emerging threat, and it was called Neglected Tropical Diseases No Longer Someone Else's Problem. The article references world-renowned NTD expert Dr. Peter Hotez of Baylor College of Medicine, who I would note parenthetically twice testified at hearings that I chaired. I read his book, and I read it not once but twice. It is a wake-up call to what these horrible diseases do. But he estimates that more than half of the 20 million Americans living in extreme poverty are infected with at least one neglected tropical disease. That's right here in the United States of America. The End Neglected Tropical Disease Act supports the treatment, control, and the elimination of NTDs, primarily by ensuring that USAID's NTD program effectively integrates treatment, control, and elimination efforts with other developmental issues such as HIV/AIDS, malaria, water and sanitation, and education. It also directs, as my good friend Mr. Series pointed out a moment ago, that the U.S. government advocate for increased efforts to address NTDs among international institutions such as the UN, World Health Organization, and the World Bank. Let's not forget that the 14 most common NTDs of them, 80% are infections caused by schistosomiasis or roundworms, whipworms, and hookworms that afflict more than 1 billion people worldwide, including 600 million school-aged children, and more than 300 million suffer from severe morbidity. Schistosomiasis is another infection affecting at least 220 million people in developing countries, and the World Health Organization estimates that 90% of those individuals are in sub-Saharan Africa. The benefits of deworming are immediate and enduring. A rigorous randomized controlled trial has shown that school-based deworming treatment reduces absenteeism by 25%. School-based deworming also benefits young siblings and other children who live nearby but are too young to be treated, leading to large cognitive improvements equivalent to half a year of schooling. Let me also point out to my colleagues that the treatment for worms is simple and cost-effective. And those treatment for hookworm, for example, in Tanzania, costs about 4 cents per treatment, 4 cents, to knock this terrible disease out of the intestinal tract. Yet one-off deworming treatment is not enough, as without sanitary and hygiene behavioral changes, people will get reinfected. So what do we need to do, and what this bill does, is to integrate USAID deworming programs with our WASH programs, water, sanitation, and health, coupled with our nutrition interventions. Let me just also make a point that needs to be underscored with exclamation points. There's a very, very robust private-public partnership that USAID leads. And the pharmaceutical industry, companies such as GlaxoSmithKline, J&J, and Merck, and of course, my friend in the chair and my friend managing the bill on the Democrat side know, because these companies hail from the great state of New Jersey, Merck in Rahway, for example. Well, every U.S. dollar invested is leveraged with $26 billion in donated medicines, $22 billion in donated medicines, which is extraordinary. I mean, the relationship there, I don't know of any other health program where the pharmaceuticals have stepped up like this to say, we're not going to sell you these drugs, we are going to donate it. We also have helped train 6.5 million individuals in countries around the world, helping to fight NTDs, build and strengthen health systems. So we are, I think, making a difference. We need to do more. And I reserve the balance of our time.
The gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Sears.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
The Chinese government has sought to erase the distinct Uyghur Muslim culture and religious traditions through mass detentions, re-education camps, and a coordinated campaign under a banner, Strike Hard Against Violent Extremism, launched in 2014. Thanks to recently leaked Chinese Communist Party documents, we now know that the impetus for this campaign came from the highest levels of the Chinese Party.
We are sending a message to Beijing. America is watching, and we will not stand silent. This legislation helps uncover the truth. It creates accountability, ensuring transparency of Chinese and foreign companies involved in the camps. And it engages the full firepower of American law and leadership, including by urging the application of global Magnitsky and other related sanctions and the full implementation of the Frank R. Wolf International Religious Freedom Act.